wonder why West Virginia has so many ghosts as opposed to, say, Maryland, or where the term hillbillies came from? It all goes back to the 1700s and who the first settlers were and the culture they brought with them and passed down. So Appalachia is more of a way of life, really, than a geographical area. It's generally described as an area that runs through 13 states, with only one that includes the entire state, West Virginia. Many of the early settlers who moved deep into rural Appalachia were German and Scotch-Irish, and of those, most had been supporters of William of Orange. He was the Protestant king of Scotland, England, and Ireland. His followers were known as Billy Boys. He was known as King Billy. When they came to America, New England was already full of British settlers. So the Billy Boys, hillbillies, settled into the wilderness of the Appalachian mountain range. They were largely poor, fiercely self-reliant, and rebellious, with an innate distrust of government after decades of fighting the English and Catholics. This is where Appalachian cultural stereotypes such as family loyalty, rebellion against authority, and a passion for self-defense gave rise to the image of hillbillies as wild, reclusive, gun-toting mountain men that wanted nothing to do with outsiders. The Scotch-Irish brought their Christian identity mixed in with pagan rituals and superstitions. So there's ghost tales and sightings of strange creatures like Bigfoot, Mothman. Movies have been made from these legends, like The X-Files and Mothman. The bad luck of walking under a ladder also has its origins in Appalachian culture. Storytelling is a strong tradition. There are storytelling festivals to this day throughout Appalachia. I've been to a storytelling event in Shepherdstown. An older gentleman in long robes told stories of his travels. First time I've been to something like that. It's interesting. Another thing you might see in some of the small towns in the older homes is two front doors. One was for entering and exiting the house. The other was for entering a room where you could sit with a recently deceased member of the household, sitting with the dead, ensuring that the body of the deceased remained escorted at all times prior to burial. Was a custom brought from the old country, and the double front doors made it easier for friends and extended family to visit without disturbing the rest of the house. They also brought their knowledge of how to make homemade liquor, which they believed was their God-given right because it was made from what God gave them: corn, apples, mountain water, and continued to operate stills long after it was illegal. They also believed it was their right to bear arms, to defend themselves, and to take care of their family and community. Although the Scotch-Irish were the main settlers, Native Americans and African Americans played a role in early Appalachian culture. The knowledge of medicinal herbs and plants came in large part from the Native Americans, and the music, particularly the banjo, came from African American settlers. And these three peoples lived in close proximity to each other, and they intermarried. The Melungeon people are said to be a result of those unions. You know, when a community is isolated, it tends to be less homogeneous, more unique and interesting. And that's certainly the case, I think, with the Appalachian culture. The reason for the isolation goes back to the distrust of authority and government. The early settlers brought with them and passed down to generations. Plus the mountain terrain. It's the main reason Appalachia did not modernize as fast as the rest of the country, which created some hardships there. When we first moved here about 25 years ago, I found the books by Lee Smith. The first one I read was Oral History. It's about a college girl who had roots in Appalachia but was not familiar with any of her relatives there. She took an oral history class, and as a project for that class, decided to visit. She left a tape recorder at the abandoned cabin that was owned by her deceased great-grandmother. Then the rest of the novel is told by voices from the past captured on that recorder. And the book reflects the Appalachian culture, language, and personalities in a way that you don't get by just reading a history book. I couldn't put it down. I read all of Lee Smith's books about Appalachia, and they're all good, but Oral History is the best, I think. Another series of books about Appalachia, the Firefox series, is also good. It's nonfiction. The books teach creative self-reliance and help preserve the stories, crafts, and customs of Appalachia. And it's taught through interviews with old-timers, including a woman named Aunt Airy. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. The first volume was published in 1972. And the books are edited by Elliot Wigington. And those books have introduced millions of people to the traditional wisdom of these mountains. And West Virginia is very different today, particularly the Eastern Panhandle, probably because of the proximity to the D.C.-Baltimore metro area. But the Appalachian culture is still evident, more so in central West Virginia. The nice thing about the Eastern Panhandle is that 2 hours east, you're in the heart of Washington, D.C. or Baltimore. 2 hours west, you're in the mountains with remnants of one of the oldest, most interesting cultures in the country. Okay, thanks for tuning in. I got a lot of this information from the History Collection website and just from books I've read over the years. And I hope you found it interesting. I do a video every week, so I will see you next week.